Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you to this evening, to this discussion that we are organizing in the connection of the exhibition of Claudia Heinemann, photographer. Her exhibition title is Siberian Exiles. And today we have invited three photographers to discuss about visual narratives of traumatic history in photography. So I would like to introduce our guests today for our talk. So the author of the exhibition, Claudia Heinemann, Latvian photographer 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶𝗶 and Lithuanian photographer Tadas Kazakevičius. And the talk will be moderated by photography historian and curator Agnė Narušytė. And before the talk, we start our discussion, I would like to invite the ambassador of the Netherlands.
Very often people say that photography and photos show more than words, but I doubt a little bit nowadays whether that's still the case with artificial intelligence, with the development of deepfakes. And there is something else that is needed, and that you will see also, and that's how I got to know Claudia and her work, because that is a real way of storytelling where you combine the visual arts, photography, with interviews, with archival research, and put it together to create, so to say, the complete picture. And I think that's extremely important. And the reason why that's important is because Claudia has invested, as I got to know in the last 3.5 years, and the work before, has invested massively in the Baltic region, in the knowledge of the history, in knowing the people, and speaking to the people, and digging deep in the stories, and telling these stories in the way that I just mentioned that. And that is extremely important, of course, for the region, for the people in the region, to understand the tragic history, for the current generation to understand their parents, their grandparents that they went through. But it's also extremely important, and I would like to stress that, because it is important for those living in the western part of Europe. Because in the western part of Europe, we had a different history between 1945 and 1990. And therefore, we have a different understanding of the history. And that understanding of the history, not having lived themselves under the totalitarian oppression from the Soviet regime, means that also the political taskmasters, or to say the political elite, intellectual elite in the West, have a different concept. They heard about it, but they haven't lived through it. And therefore, I think it's so important to tell these stories, to create that with photography, with archive research, with the interviews, and bring it alive, to make something relevant today again, what happened yesterday, so that people can take that on board also in their decision-making today, and that creates our tomorrow. So with these words, because I think I'm the amateur, I only make photographs with my smartphone, and even that one is not very smart. I would like to thank you all for coming. I like to thank Claudia and the other colleagues here willing to be in the panel. Thank you so much. 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗶𝗶.
As well, we have a Goethe Institute, who was a very big supporter of the exhibition as well, encouraged us to organize this discussion. So therefore, Anna Maria Strassby.
I'm very much looking forward to actually listening to all of you. And I think I want to be very short, give a thank you, of course, to Claudia and everyone who is speaking tonight. And I think it's very beautiful that we have today somehow a joint Latvian, Lithuanian, German, Dutch endeavor, Lithuanian, of course, because it shows how it's a very European topic, and it's how you also said, Ambassador, a very needed conversation, more needed for some, less needed for others, maybe. I have to think, I'm also personally very curious to hear your thoughts on photography in relation to history and on photography today, because as you said, I remember when I came to the event tonight, I remember a little bit the words of 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗶𝗶 recently, who said, maybe it was a very, very short era where we thought that, photography somehow showed an interpretation of reality, and maybe it was just a glimpse of our human's life, and maybe it's changing into something entirely different now, the imagination and our perception of imagery. I'm very much looking forward to your insights on your work. And I'm also very grateful to Claudia for taking so much time for being back. Also being back with an event for the soldiers of the German Brigade tomorrow, which will be another important endeavor of the whole project. Thank you so much. Thank you to 𝗖𝗹𝘂 and the National Gallery, and wishing you all a beautiful evening.
Thank you, 𝗖𝗹, for presenting us, and thank you both for introducing, and especially I was moved by the ambassador's talk, because I recognize this topic, which strikes me as well, how different our histories are. And as a researcher of photography, I keep writing something about this topic. And, 35 years of independence, we talked about it in 89, in 1990, and still it's relevant. And again, I'm meeting photographers who are still continuing this work. But from 89, actually, I remember Juozas Kazlauskas, a Lithuanian photographer who went to Siberia together with a mission, with the expedition to recover the bodies of the deportees. And he documented everything. And his works were shown in Germany in 1993, I think, or 95, by our curator Raminta Jurėnaitė. And she told me once that when the Germans saw his work, he said, finally we understand why you needed independence. So, people in the West didn't think we needed independence. And somehow probably this is something that motivates me also always to research this topic. And yes, we are connected here by the topic. The topic is, of course, historical trauma, specific historical trauma related to the deportations of huge numbers of people to Siberia, to the situation where it was really hard to survive. It was forced deportation, was needed somehow by the Soviet state also for building something maybe, but also for destroying local communities, local lands. And also what is important that even while the West also didn't know about these deportations very much, in Lithuania and I think in other Baltic countries, silence surrounded them as well. I just have this quote from Milan Kundera, the Czech writer, which somehow strikes me as the motto of this conversation maybe. The struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. It's from the book of Laughter and Forgetting. Somehow I think what we all do here is working against this power, which is still really powerful now as well, and trying to destroy us. And actually, all this work is relevant today because of the war which is going on. So this is kind of the background against which we are going to talk today, I think. But first we decided that photographers should present their work themselves. And first I want to invite Claudia Heinerman and her exhibition Siberian Exiles, Baltic Testimonies of Soviet Repression are exhibited now. It took 7 years to research this topic for Claudia. And I want to mention also that probably before this work, she did a book on 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶 a post-war story about German children who were lost after the war, and she received awards for her books, and actually she has published several books on this topic. So maybe Claudia, please, the floor is yours. Please present your work.
I usually work on long-term projects about repression, consequences of war and genocide. From a young age, I have been interested in how we as individuals, communities or countries deal with our history and what we can learn from it. In my work, I combine portraits, landscapes, archival material and oral history, which are then published in books and develop as exhibitions. As you can see my work of Siberian exiles in the exhibition, I will show you more current work. With a title, In the Woods, Srebrenica 1995. 30 years ago, on July 11, 1995, General Ratko Mladic troops captured the UN-protected enclave Srebrenica, resulting in the genocide of 8,372 men and boys. At that time, 40,000 refugees were in the enclave, fleeing the Serbs and seeking protection at the UN headquarters in Potocari. But the men were convinced that the UN soldiers could not protect them. They knew they would be killed if they fell into Serbian hands. Therefore, 50,000 men, boys, and a few women decided to flee through the forests to reach Tuzla in the Free Territory. Only half of them arrived alive. Horrific ambushes took place in the forests where many men were killed. Others were captured, murdered at execution sites, and dumped in mass graves. Until now, the stories of the men who survived the flight through the woods and who witnessed the genocide with their own eyes have rarely been recorded. In this project, I share their testimonies. Hamnia. On July 11, when it was clear that Srebrenica would fall, my wife went to the UN headquarters. The farewell was dramatic. I have no words for it. My son was only 1 year old. We feared it was a farewell forever, as if we weren't just saying goodbye to each other, but to life itself. We all cried and then parted ways. I walked to Sushnari, where around 50,000 men were gathered. Fatima. We formed a column and the first group started walking at midnight. The first day was already incredibly difficult for me. I started out exhausted. As a doctor, I had been caring for the large number of wounded since the beginning of the attacks on Srebrenica. I had not eaten or slept for days. Not far from Sushnari was the enclave's border. That area was riddled with mines. We had to walk up and down hill, one by one, holding hands or clothes of the person next to us. The column must have been around 15 kilometers long. Ramis. In the hills of Kamenička-Brod, also called Bukva, we were surrounded by the Serbs, who suddenly started shooting at us from all sides, with tanks, transporters, automatic weapons, everything. We panicked and didn't know which way to run. People around me were falling dead. I was surrounded by corpses. An estimated 1,000 men were killed in the hills of Bukva, including my father, brothers, and brothers. Since 2002, I have been exploring the area in search of the remains of them. At first, I found whole bodies, but now, after so many years, it's mainly bones, shoes, and other items of clothing. Mevludin. I had survived the big ambush at Bukva, but was captured by the Serbs soon after it. Together with other men, I was taken to a school in Oharovac, where we were packed together with more than 1,000 men, waiting for our fate. Blindfolded, we were taken in vans to an execution site. We had to get out and line up.
My cousin was standing next to me when they shot at us. I just fell down. My cousin fell on my back and I felt something hot running down my skin. I was terrified and didn't dare to breathe. They weren't allowed to see that I was still alive, so I kept completely still and pretended to be dead. I kept hearing shots, people falling to the ground. It was only at night, when it was completely quiet, that I dared to move. Then I couldn't hold it anymore. I started crying and couldn't stop. Somehow I managed to escape and reached the free territory on July 16th. Nedzat. The Serbs used poison that used people to hallucinate, that caused people to hallucinate. People surrendered, started screaming, making themselves a danger to everyone. I myself started hallucinating during one of the many ambushes. Instead of the battlefield, I saw a house with smoke coming from the chimney, and I wanted to go inside to eat and sleep. Then I saw a black Opel Kadett driving into the woods to pick up wounded people. I pulled my legs away so the car wouldn't run over it. My buddies dragged me to a stream and poured cold water on my face. Then I came to my senses. It was terrifying to lose reality like that. 𝗲𝗂𝗶𝗶. During a battle near Maričići, we captured one of the Serbian army officers. He had a walkie-talkie with him and used it to contact his commander. We asked him to demand that a corridor would be created so we could reach the safe zone, and in return we would save his life. But the commander abruptly cut the conversation short, saying, "Not a single Bosniak will reach the free zone." 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗂𝗶𝗶. At the last firing line before the free zone, I was hit by an anti-aircraft gun. I was convinced that my kidney had been hit and that I would die, and somehow I accepted that. As a doctor, I had bandages and medical supplies with me. I gave them to my mates so that they could use them for other wounded. But I survived. When I arrived in the free territory, I was devastated. I was not relieved or happy, only deeply saddened and bitter for all those men who didn't make it. When someone asks me how many family members I lost in the war, I always say 8,372, including my father, my brother, and many other family members. So far, I have interviewed 20 eyewitnesses. It was difficult for them to delve into their horrific memories, but they all feel compelled to speak out because the genocide is still often denied by the Serbs. This brings me to my personal motivation for this project. To counter genocide denial, I believe it's essential that we, as photographers, writers, and journalists, document and record the testimonies of eyewitnesses, whether it concerns genocide that took place in the past or is happening now as we speak. Thank you for listening.
Now it's turn for 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗶𝗶 from Latvia. As his surname shows, he has a double identity. This double identity is a cause for him to do research, to create his work by using photography, stories, metaphors, fiction, documentation. And he has created, for example, a trilogy, Motherland, Homeland, Fatherland, exploring these notions, these topics. And one of them is related to Siberia as well. To me, it was interesting that he was shortlisted for the prestigious Arles Prix du Livre Book Award in 2024. So I think it's a great achievement, and received Riga Photography Biennale Award in 2019. So just these two facts from many, many facts I've separated. I don't know if they're most important to you or not.
Thank you everyone for coming, and I hope you will enjoy this evening. My name is 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗶𝗵 As she mentioned, my father was Armenian, but actually also half Greek, and my mother's side is half Latvian and also Russian. And when I will share this story, then you will understand why. So my creative work revolves around multi-layered research-based narratives, exploring identity, genetics, history, and also existentialism, especially in my early works. And I often incorporate archival materials, notes, and interviews into my projects, where reality and fiction intervene, allowing a poetic realm to engage with documentary reality. I am also keenly interested in creating photo books using archival materials, note-taking, and investigative recordings, very similar like 𝗖𝗂𝗶 does it. And I explore how photography, design, and materials can significantly influence the narrative of an entire photographic project. My bachelor degree is in graphic design, and my master's in arts is in photography. I graduated at the University of Brighton, so I think these two educations gave me kind of this broader vision, how to incorporate photography into exhibition space, also in a photo books. So I will show a bit more. To prepare for this presentation and discussion, the main focus is on Siberian part, but before ahead of this discussion, I thought that it's important to explain why I do it and in what context. So at the beginning, in 2015, I started to work on my first book on the project. It was part of my master's in arts. I was studying in England, and then by being away for many years, I was working in the United States as well. Then I was studying in England, and I was away from my homeland. And actually, being away for a long period of time, I started to see my homeland completely differently, as I would live in my country on everyday basis. So somehow I became an outsider who came back to my homeland and started to see people and the place from completely different perspective. So over the past decade, I have developed a trilogy in three interconnected visual stories that can be viewed as a unified or as three individual and distinct works. So the first project, which I started to develop in 2015, was called Homeland, the Longest Village in a Country, published as a book in 2018 and self-published in 2016. The self-published book was released in edition of 30. There were 4 special editions, and they were sold out pretty quickly in England because they were self-made, self-binded, etc. And then I decided that this story has to be brought for wider audience, and I published in edition of 750. During this process of making the first book, I touched on identity, and then I started to look in the context of trilogy. So basically, I brought also these books here. You are welcome to come and look at them afterwards. So each book is a chapter of the trilogy, where each part deals separately with the notions and meanings of homeland, motherland, and fatherland, from a deeply personal and autobiographical perspective. For many people, the meanings of homeland, fatherland, and motherland might represent the same concept, but for others they can be completely different when viewed in the context of this trilogy. So the homeland, motherland are published books. Motherland is published in 2023, and Krung, the crane that flew over the fatherland, is still in the process. Homeland talks about the place where I'm coming from, how the place where we growing up shapes us as a personalities. Motherland talks about the place of my mother's birth, which is 163 kilometers beyond the polar circle in 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶, which is in Siberia. In this place, my grandma was deported, and she lived there for 15 years, from 1941 until 1956. And Fatherland touch on the topic of Armenian identity, and also about the place where my father and great-grandfather's coming from. That part also has this traumatic aspect because of the genocide, which was in 1915, when the Ottoman Empire attacked Armenians and killed around millions. So, but it kind of influenced all this history. And the main presentation will be about this Siberian part today, which is called Motherland, Far Beyond the Polar Circle. But both these books are multi-layered photographic narratives in the form of a photo book, with cross-references like hyperlinks to additionally inserted stories connected to subjects and landscape. So there are ideas which I brought in the books, the way how the viewer can interact with them. There are inserts, there are different circles, as a hyperlinks where you can dive deeper into the context of this project. I was really interested in this story about my grandmother and her time in Siberia. And here in this slide you can see my grandmother, and her name was Milda. And so she was deported in 1941 because of her first husband. They got married in 1939, and he was commander of institution of 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗶𝗶 in Latvian, which is kind of national guards. And in Soviet Union, they were considered as enemies for the Soviet Union and called as a fascist organization. And the idea of this project was that I will use a Soviet-made medium format camera, which is seen underneath my grandmother, to narrate the story of the city which was built upon the bounds of Soviet prisoners, where many deported Latvians and also Lithuanians once lived. And my journey led me to 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶 in northern Siberia, where my mother Inta was born in 1952, and where my grandmother Milda spent almost 15 years in exile after being deported on June 14, 1941, which was the first mass deportation in all three Baltic countries. And Milda lived there until the summer of 1956. After returning to Latvia, she has remained silent about her experience, much like the landscapes that quietly hold this history. And considered enemies of the USSR, many were taken to gulag camps and left to die from cold, starvation, and poverty. And there was only few who survived and returned back to their countries, which is also where we can learn about these stories also in Claudia's exhibition. Here in this map is the journey what I made from Riga to Moscow. So I stayed there overnight, and from Moscow to Krasnoyarsk I took a Trans-Siberian train. And from Krasnoyarsk I took a small plane, which was 3 hours, to land in 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶𝗶. I stayed in Krasnoyarsk for 3 nights and explored also that part. My grandmother also was brought in Krasnoyarsk region. She was in Nazarovo, stayed there for a year, and then in 1942 she was brought up to north to 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶. Those women who were younger, stronger, being sent to north, but those who had like little childs, they stayed in that area. So this is the photograph which I found in our family archive, where is my mother and her twin brother. They were born in 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶. And my grandmother met her partner in 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶, and she was still hoping to meet her husband, but they were divided in 1941, and her first husband was sent to Gulag camp, where he has died in 1942 in this labor camp in a very bad condition. And actually that archival material is also shown in this book. This is my arrival in 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶, and I went there during the winter time in 2019, from 2019 to 2020. The reason I chose this winter time is because I found in our family archive this image where my mother and her twin brother are by this Christmas tree. And I realized that in my concept, I wanted to use a Christmas tree as a unifying element throughout this book. Similar, like I will show a bit later. Maybe here. So another element was the cross as well. I was trying to find the cross into the landscape, which represents kind of this feeling of the cemetery or the place where is buried quite a lot of deportees. And here is the sign of this place of 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶. And my main goal was to find the house where my grandmother lived and also my mother was born. In archives in Latvia, I found this postcard with the address, and from this address in archives in 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶, I found the house, how it used to look like. But at that time when I found this street, there wasn't any house anymore. They were all destroyed. Because in this area there is frost, and all the buildings are collapsing, or it's not possible even to live in there. So this Christmas tree, and as you see, during that period of time, I could find different Christmas trees, and it becomes as a unifying element to pay tribute also kind of to this idea that the Christmas tree actually originated in Baltics. And there is always discussion, is it originated in Riga or Tallinn? But this kind of has this biblical motive as well. And Olga, she is one of the women who is still living in 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶, and she has Latvian origin. And she became as one of the main characters in the book. She shared quite a lot of knowledge about their experiences and their ancestors. But somehow she decided not to leave 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗱𝗶, and she still lives there. And here is the book, and during the process of making this book and during the process of going to Siberia, I was writing diary entries every day throughout my journey. And then at the end, I've decided to publish also. Here is all my stories as well. And here you can see how the book looks like with all the inserts and materials. So it's kind of interactive book, and I chose different materials. I chose to coating and different printing techniques like riso printing. Basically, this book was produced in 4 different typographies. This case folder was actually produced in Kaunas with a hands-on press. So yeah, some elements in Latvia, some elements in Lithuania. Here is exhibition shot in Latvian Railway History Museum alongside with the book publishing. And that's pretty much it. I try to be as short as possible. And thank you so much for your attention.
Tadas Kazakevičius is well known here, and he has created a series which was turned into a book soon to be gone, where he records everything that is still kind of exists in our reality, but it's obvious that it no longer will be here. But he also created a project on Siberian exiles, on children actually, which was called Last Year's Snow. Probably Tadas will talk about it.
The snows of yesteryear.
Of yesteryear. Okay, I don't know the official translation. And also he's continuing, as far as I know, to work on this Siberian topic.
My reason for being here today is that it happened that at some point in my life, I'm a documentary photographer, and at some point in my life, I was always hoping to touch the Siberian theme. And as I'm not I don't have a degree in history, or I'm not anthropologist. I was always worried a bit to touch this theme, because I think we have quite many articles, quite many books, and there are many people that have much knowledge about that. And until I felt in my inside that I should touch this theme, I couldn't manage to find the right way. And actually the right way and the right moment to touch this theme actually was reading a book to my daughter Adele. It's called the 𝗖𝗹𝘂𝗶 I think most of you know, and I'm very happy that actually it appeared. And why was excited about that, because I understood that we have many literature, much books on Siberian exile, but the problem is sometimes we do not create the way to make it interesting for people, to make interesting especially for younger generation, which I think the biggest problem of ours is forgetting the history, and not forgetting the history is touching the young people with the stories like that. So Siberian haiku was shocking form as a comics, as a bit funny, as a bit like something cool to do, and actually it was about Siberian deportations, and I was shocked how it touched and how many languages it was translated. And I thought I'll just meet this person who wrote 𝗔𝗪 and I would find out actually if it's real, if it's not fiction. And then suddenly we met in Lukiškės Square, and I said, this 𝗔𝗪𝘂𝗶 the real person, actually. 𝗔𝗪𝘂𝗶 the person that I'm very sorry, I'm just trying to understand how computer works here. Is the real personality? And actually she said, yes, it's my father. And And here you go. I started with that I want to be interested in this theme of the Train of Orphans. And Train of Orphans was in 1946. And very quickly, need to explain. In 1946, 250 orphans were taken back from Siberia because they didn't have parents. Some of them, of course, had, but it was hidden. The fact was hidden, and they were taken to Lithuania, and more than 250 children were taken to their relatives to be raised in Lithuania, which quite contradicted the actual concept of Siberian exile and deportations, because why almost kill the nationality would be taken back and raised as the children in their situation. But I think there was some sort of agenda or publicity thing to do, because it needed to be done to please some people and to show that it's not so tragical. But in the end, of course, 150,000 were more than 150,000 Lithuanians were taken, and how many of them died there, it's quite shocking. So I started to find out these people, these children, these orphans, and I understood that I need to tell the story about them. I found 10 orphans that were still alive. Teresa is passed away already, which is very sad fact for me. And eventually, of course, these people are leaving because they are very old. Most of them were taken in 1941 to deportations. The first ones, as Georgs mentions. So I started to find them and talk with them and spend time with them, but eventually understood that it's not so easy just to come to home and just to talk with these people. And it's not, sometimes enough to touch visually and anthropologically just like that. So eventually during from 2019 to 2021, what I was doing, I was even though the plan in the start it was to visit Siberia, like Georgs did too, but I fell in this situation of Lithuanian problematic diplomacy with Russia, and then it started to close up. And basically, if Georgs made into the last trains, I did not make into the last trains. Maybe I'm happy because of that, and why not? So in some sense, I worked landscapes different way. I tried to reflect their journey to Lithuania in the last 35 kilometers. And one of these landscapes here, for example, it's one of the last turns that took the trains with children. The last turn to go to Vilnius, actually, from Naujoji Vilnia. Anyway, with most of people, and actually everyone, I think, except Teresa, which could not move much, we traveled to the places that they were taken from, or they lived in there. And I took their portraits, I created their portraits in these places. And what I was always asking them, if they could collect something, they would take with them something that as a children they would take as a memory of their family. So, for example, Aldona was taking the drawing of her friend that made a drawing of a burial place in the place that they were deported to. I'll not go into many details on every personality, but these were the things, and I was always taking photos of them with these things that they took home that reflected the memories of their life in Siberia, and that would make memories of their families, like last bits of the family belongings, so almost like a last bits of the family that left. And eventually what I did, I created the website, which is a multi-layered thing with actually I would love to show it to you quickly, but I'm a bit worried about time. If you would like, and actually without taking your time, I would suggest you to go to www.pernykštis sniegas.lt, and there will be English and Lithuanian translation, so you would get some information, explanation, and when you go through the website, actually it's portraiture and object photography and archival imagery too. From archival imagery and from archival materials, I would use these, and even in the exhibition, I would use these things that they were carrying home. And one of these is, for example, Aldi's mother's letter to their relatives to Lithuania, where she explains how their life is there, and how hard it is, and she asks for certain things to be sent. And by archival imagery, I wanted to introduce it too, but I did not know what to do, what angle to take. So what I did, I took the burial images of children that died in there. So in some sense, I would project the happiness of the children that were taken back, and I would project the sadness of the history of the children that's left there, and eventually there would be like burials of these children, as you see, for example, in this image. So it kind of shocks you and makes you. So one picture makes you happy by seeing how wonderful human beings and how much they reached in by their life in Lithuania after they came back. But in some sense, you would show other way too. Now I'll jump quickly to the second part, because finishing this story, I felt like I finished one chapter. It was dedicated to this multi-layered website platform, and of course it was exhibited as exhibition in Prospektas Gallery, and later it was exhibited in the European Parliament, where this exhibition was taken. And that's where I was maybe mostly shocked, because when I went there, I was happy to transport all this exhibition, but there were a few people that approached me and they questioned not the dramaticity of the story, but they would blend and I'm talking about people who were in European Parliament, so diplomats. They would question, is this exchange of the nations was almost like exchange of United States, like you would go from New York to California, and cultures change because it's big country, it's a big federation. It's so I would listen to that, and I would like, what is happening if we question this there? My work is not done, and I still need to carry on with this theme. And I was a bit shocked when I came back. There was a Taiwan ambassador which was shocked to bits by this exhibition, because the history of Taiwan and what's the connection with China, because he saw almost the future in this, what we see as our past. So then I understood that work is not finished, and suddenly I got a call from another orphan, and actually she questioned, she gave me a question, why I'm not part of this series. And I said, well, there's no list of every child, every orphan that was taken with their phone number and address. So you get this thread all the time, and you find, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll find someone. And when I met her after a few weeks, I understood that, okay, if I can't tell the story, if I can't put her into this series, I need to carry on with something else. So 1.5 years ago, I started a new photography series, which is called Mano akys matė, My Eyes Have Seen. And it's broadly about Siberian deportees, but actually in this way, I wanted to tell more broader and maybe more narrow and more quicker way, because I feel that there's so many stories and people are passing away, so I need to find out the format. How can I talk quickly and become almost like like newspaper has sentencia, and they would write some story, let's say about one person. So I use my social media actually as some sort of newspaper platform, and what I want to do is every few weeks, every 3 weeks, I share one more story of every every Siberian deportee I can meet, I can take photos and I can write their stories. So even today, I visited one person, Alvydas 𝗖𝗹𝗂𝗶𝗵 and actually this is like ongoing thing for me, and in some sense I do believe that I will carry on as long as I will find people that remember them this, because my series is called My Eyes Have Seen, so I don't want to tell someone else's story, like if it's let's say children's memory of their parents being there. I want still to have, so until I can manage to find, I hope I'll carry on with that. And by this I created a different format. So this format is, let's say, more philosophically, poetically taken into account of diptych portrait, which one image is anthropological portrait of the person, and second image is more psychological portrait. So I use this as two shots, as a two contact prints. In one of them, I try to catch person thinking and remembering the moment, the sad, bad moment of their life in deportation, Siberian deportation. And other, I just want to take a nice portrait of that person just as an anthropological portrait. But by showing these two, I have two different mental states, like we can say. One is now and one is past already. So, but it's not just a portrait. It's by next to that, I choose while I'm here, while I'm with that person, I always try to record all the talking, all the story that he or she told me. But what I want to do is to take one strong memory that shocks you, and in some sense use it as a trigger of for the viewer. So let's say young person that browses through Instagram, let's say, and he sees or she sees that, and soon as he reads the translation or the facsimile of this memory, it would be like a, instant shock to the personality to understand that actually how is this possible. And even now, when we see what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, I understand that it needs to be remembered and remembered and remembered, and not to be forgotten, not just as a full book, full place where you can read, let's say, in few hours, but it needs to be constantly reminded. So this is what's my plan. So my social media would be used to tell these stories and to tell these strong memories. And of course, I hope to make this into exhibition or some other format too, because it's ongoing work. Maybe at the moment, I'm in the situation where I collect the stories. But the final thing, what I want to do actually with this series and with this material I collect and I write on the typewriter, I collect all these copies with the carbon print. So I do many copies of these things because in some sense the ending format is a book, which I want to do at least few copies of them. And I think Lithuanians, more or less, older generation Lithuanians know the Lietuvos TSR Istorija. It was released in 4 parts, 4 volumes. And actually, it's so funny because you can see how the quality of every volume is cheaper and cheaper. Actually, it shows Soviet Union getting cheaper and cheaper. The first volume is nicely printed, blue golden letters. But I'm not about that. I'm just maybe having this symbol of collapsing of Soviet Union. But they do not mention here the most important thing: how to make socialistic republic, to clean all the thinking people. And in Lithuanian or Latvian, let's say, history, through Soviet times, they did not mention about deportations. Why it's needed? Because you need to create this not thinking generation that loves the idea of communism. So I thought, it's not actually this. So what I will do is basically I'll flip this book. Actually, it will be imitation of that historical book with the print, but with the transparent cover. It will add few words that will change the whole situation, and it will be occupied Lithuanian history. And of course, the name My Eyes Have Seen and things like that. But basically, what I want to do is reintroduce this book, make the symbol out of that is that I rewrite or add or extend the history of actually what was not written. So this book would become a symbol of something that actually was passed between the how to say quiet between the pages. So these pages will be added inside it, and it will be expansion of the actual occupied Lithuanian history. So that's that. I think I tried to be very quick, but I don't know if I managed. So I hope to see that book eventually, and I will try to do that in few variations, not variations, in few volumes. One to have as exhibition piece, other maybe to send to book competitions or something like that. So this is why everything I do is I do the copies of them. So even the typewriter which is used, it's quite interesting because I had to find this typewriter that writes in Lithuanian because, we have these symbols. So it's quite sometimes a bit tiring to create this visual that you still don't know how it will look like in the end, but almost like try to think what will be needed in the production of these things. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope it was explanatory and you understood what I wanted and why I touched this theme.
It was interesting to listen to everyone, and I thought it would be a good idea for everyone to present their work rather than me telling something about it, because, when the artists are present, we want to hear from them what they're working on, and I've heard a lot of very interesting things from everyone. So Georgs has explained why he has chosen this topic. It's actually part of his identity, his family. And Tadas has explained as well. I never knew that initially it was prompted by this book for children, which we all know. It's a very famous book in Lithuania. And the mystery is Claudia. I mean, you are not from here. Why did you choose this topic?
I came to this topic while I was working on the wolf children. And the wolf children mentioned a couple of, in many interviews, that they were taken in and the farmers with risk that they would be deported. And then I thought, I learned at school about the Gulag system, but I never learned about deportations to remote areas. So I felt, in that sense, very uneducated at that moment. So I started research, and I came to the conclusion, in the West, this topic is just not known. So that was one of my motivations in the beginning. Another motivation was that in that time the Russians was the annexation of the Crimea, and the NATO or the Dutch decided to send militaries to the eastern border. And in the press release was written we want to, now you said it in English, om de angst tegen de Russen tegemoet te komen. to
deterrence?
Yes. Yeah. So to take the fear for the Russians serious. And I thought, if we want to understand that fear, then we need to look into the history. So that was another motivation. And the third one was this in the Soviet Union and in Russia, nobody is ever, there was no trial like the Nuremberg process or something like that. So no one is ever convicted for it. So I think, and then under Putin, this history is again pushed under the carpet. So I think to do this eyewitnesses testimonies is a way to say it happened and to preserve it for the future and to contribute it to a correct written history. So that was my... Yes.
Thank you. Yes, yeah, we have done impressive work. I mean, when I was looking at this exhibition, it was amazing how you connected all three countries. I mean, it's much wider than anyone else's research. It's Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, but also the topics, in terms of topics. It's, for example, you even have included this atomic threat, a nuclear threat, like bombing and radiation and pollution, and how these people were affected by it. So in your exhibition, I felt how overwhelming was this threat, as you say, this danger, because it's not just removing people from home, which is terrible in itself, and moving to the conditions where they cannot survive, but also the whole machinery of the Soviet Union was working as some grinding machine, grinding people for their ideological needs. So I think it's very impressive that you did this wider topic, somehow touched more aspects of life and history. And yeah, it was really impressive in that aspect. I wanted to move to the question of form. I mean, all of you have chosen to investigate something. And when you tell your stories, of course, photography is just part of them. In every case, we see portraits, we see landscapes, sometimes objects. And would they speak without words? I think that words are also necessary, and actually it rings the bell with what the ambassador said. You know, does photography say everything? So I just would like to learn from you what you think about what photography can tell. Because, for example, you go to Siberia, all you can see is this empty landscape. And sometimes the landscape, sometimes it shows something has happened before. But to me, when I see a landscape, I always think how much is hidden, how actually time has managed to delete all the signs of trauma, of history, of blood, of anything. And still you take a photograph and it tells something. So what do you think? Maybe Georgs, maybe you could say. So.
I was carefully listening of this, the photography and these hidden layers. And I'm always been interested in this, how you can trigger a viewer's imagination by looking at the landscape, and there could be used different methods, metaphorical, symbolic, or how you deal with this visual language. One way, as you mentioned, there could be a text which helps kind of to connect with the image. But I think if somebody could create an image which touch an intuitive level, it's even higher achievement in that sense. But of course, every viewer has different experience, and the way how the viewer could look at the things, it also makes a huge difference. If I talk about my experience and my project, of course, quite important is this research process. By researching a specific topic, you kind of can come to the conclusion what kind of method would fit the most for that specific subject. But at the same time, what you imagined, what you would like to achieve, but during the process of making this work, there are specific materials you find, or specific people you meet, specific things you learn from them. that can influence the entire project during the process of making the work. In this project, as I showed, I was thinking about this biblical motive, because all the deportees and people who were sent to the Gulag camps, they sacrificed quite a lot. If you think and read the Bible, it's kind of similar. Jesus sacrificed, but there was many people, so it's kind of related in a sense. Also, these crosses are a lot of people who died as the city was built upon the bones of these Soviet prisoners. So I've decided to look at these elements like a crosses in the landscape, or use this Christmas tree as a little warmth in this vast coldness. And whenever and how we as a society live in a specific location, we as a humans always tend to survive in different circumstances. And those people who've been sent to Siberia, they face this harsh reality. And even though this harsh reality, you want to find some happiness, some warmth in this place. That's why I thought this Christmas tree can unite and gather people around. There is some kind of event which happening in every family or in every place. That's why I kind of chose this part of the year. Another thing is, for me as an artist, I had to experience the true Siberia by feeling the cold, feeling the winter, and that is the least I could manage. But at least I could feel this weather condition. And other challenge I could make for myself was to use this Soviet camera, which is usually quite unreliable, the similar way like the whole Soviet system. And actually it turned out, yes, that this camera didn't work properly, so it became completely manual process of photographing. So it was very interesting experience for me. I had to fix it, I had to think it, how to actually deal with it. And that was also the least I could do. Similarly, like all these people who were experiencing the Soviet Union, they had different challenges they had to face. And I think this all elements is quite important to implement in the project. If anyone looks at it, and they could also even become as an investigator through looking this book, experiencing the material, reading all these stories. Another thing, I wasn't interested only in this traumatic experience. I was interested in the community today in this far north region, how they live there, what are their dreams and hopes for the future, and how they perceive the history of the past. For example, when I was in Siberia, I had to be as a child to erase from my mind the history and see the beauty of the landscape itself. But once we turn on this idea of this traumatic past, it's completely different way how we see this landscape. But the nature itself, it's not written by nature, it's written by human and human power and human mind. So it's quite interesting to put together all these elements.
I feel you acted as a performer in this story, a character who's perceiving everything as well. And I realized that it's relevant that our talk is in January and we have this winter to perceive it as well. There is a bit of that reality.
I thought about this, by going yesterday by bus and experiencing this winter, and actually it reminded me almost of this traveling, Trans-Siberian travel, and to come here, and it's an amazing coincidence in some way. Actually, Trans-Baltic.
Although it's now quite exceptional. Yeah, maybe, and Tadas, maybe you could tell also, in your project, I feel photography takes the biggest part among these? I mean, in Claudia's case, it's huge research, lots of travel, lots of kilometers, 7 years, and I feel that photography is like smaller part of it, although it's the main medium. And for you, it's the main thing, I think, no?
Yeah, in some sense, yes. I think that I'm always passionate about it's not right to say beautiful view, but in some sense you always want to make visual attractive to the viewer, and you want to be creative in creating a new way of looking into things. It's actually quite interesting. Today I discussed with a young person in Vilnius Photography Home about how to create landscape by let's say finding your own angle of viewing. So in my sense, for me, I think the one of the important bits, while I do many other series, let's say one about villages, other about Koronian Spit, other about industrial worker, I try always to find some sort of not new but distinctive way how this series will look. So I think this is very important for me. Even, for example, while I was showing the first series about the snows of yesteryear, it's more beautiful, how to say, landscape connected with the portraiture, connected with the beautiful aesthetics of the whole image. Now on other one, for me, it's more poetical and more, let's say, tactile feeling of the contact print, having double portrait as a vehicle to show time between. Why I do, for example, these two portraits is I want to reflect through one visual time, which is past and present. So for me, it becomes visual language for other way of telling the same story. So, but then to come back, actually, even though I'm happy that you, Agne, feel this way, that photography is the first thing. But this morning we talked with Jolanta Kryževičienė about this theme actually on a national broadcaster radio, and I told her, well, the question was very similar. I explained that I'm not just photographer here. I think I'm an anthropologist even more. Because for me, this visual is secondary, to be honest, even though I try to be creative in this process of creating the visual. But for me, facsimile of this memory is as important. So, and then as a third part, the whole explanation and all the talking with that person during that day, let's say today, was as equally important for me too, because sometimes I'm touched by visual, sometimes I'm touched by story, but sometimes when I come back after talks with these people, we are so quick, and maybe today, especially in our very high pace daily life, we do not listen to what these people talk. And I remember once I came back from Juozas, the first person I showed to you, and I became teary in the evening, because just then I understood the strength of what he told me, because I was too quick to listen to him. And then I understood that actually it's not the visual, it's not the facsimile, it's not my creativity on the book, but actually the main thing what I do is to go and listen to him. And that and then I become I feel myself more anthropologist than photographer. And I feel like I'm this, let's say, not the last person who listens, but as actually Grażyna said, she will tell me, the last person she will tell ever the story about Siberian memories is for me. So just then I understand how important I'm for these people too. So I don't know, maybe I elaborated too far on my explanation, but for me, the part of talking with these people is as important as photography, and visual is as important too. But then somehow I feel it's not the first thing.
Come on, not too far. It's very interesting to learn.
Never.
Actually, every time I talk to photographers, I feel I'm learning to look at photographs, however much I've been doing this, still it comes something new every time. And what about you, Claudia? Are you an anthropologist, historian, or photographer, or all together?
Well, what I would like to add to this is that with every project, I think you have to think about your visual language. Oral history is for me equal important than photography, maybe more important. But anyhow, you have to think about what is the visual language you want to use and what fits the best to the story you want to tell. So for example, for the wolf children, that were children who wandered in the forest for many years alone, and so if I go to that forest and take photos, I would take them different than for another story. So I think about what kind of feeling do I want to give to the viewer. I want that the viewer feels, if he imagines he's 7 years old, for example, how awful it is to live in the forest. So visual, you always have to think about the right visual language to your story.
It's so interesting to hear this because, and I forgot to mention actually the snows of yesteryear, I took these people to the places that they were taken from because I understood that if I'll take them there, they want it or not, they will be touched by the location. And they will show a different
Emotion.
Emotion, and it worked so perfect. So it's very interesting to hear that actually you were thinking about this metaphorical forest thing too.
Thanks. Actually, we really have come to the end of time, so maybe we could ask questions in this, at the drinks afterwards. And now we have to conclude. We also wanted to talk what's the use of it, whether all these projects affect people and how they change our understanding of history, and how they change the way we see the situation now, the war in Ukraine and what Russians are doing there. But I think in a way, a little bit we touched these questions.
So yes, we touched.
Yeah, so maybe we can conclude here, and thank you all for listening, to the artists especially. And I hope this has given you something, that you will take something out of this.